The stars had always been quiet. For 800 years, humanity had reached into the darkness of space, building colonies on distant worlds and trading with alien species who barely noticed them. Humans were small. Humans were weak. Humans were nothing special in a galaxy filled with ancient empires and powerful civilizations, Commander. Lysa Chen stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Station and watched her screens fill with red warnings. Her hands were steady, but her heart was not. She had trained her whole life for moments like this. But nothing could have prepared her for what she was seeing. The Valorian Dominion had arrived 300 years ago. The Valorians had begun their conquest of the galaxy. They moved from system to system, crushing any species that refused to bow before them. 17 star systems had fallen. Billions of beings across dozens of worlds now served the Dominion as slaves. No one had ever stopped them. No one had even slowed them down, and now their warships filled the sky above Earth. YSA counted them on her screens. 100 ships. 200. 500? The numbers kept climbing until her systems could no longer track them all. Over 1,000 Valorian warships hung in orbit, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their shadows fell across cities and oceans. Their weapons could turn continents to ashdod. The message came through every channel at once. The Valorian commander spoke in a voice that was cold and empty of feeling. People of Earth, you have 48 hours to surrender your world and all human colonies to the Valorian Dominion. You will serve us, or you will be destroyed. There is no third choice. There will be no negotiation. Transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge. Lysa looked at her officers. She saw the fear in their eyes, the same fear that was spreading across the planet below. Earth's defense fleet consisted of 42 ships. 42 against more than 1,000? They would not last an hour. Send word to the colonies, she said quietly. Tell them what is happening. Tell them to run if they can. She did not believe running would help. The Valorians were thorough. They would hunt down every human colony, every ship, every last member of her species. This was not a war. This was an extinction. Lysa walked to the observation window and looked down at Earth. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting over the world where humanity had been born. 8 billion people lived on that planet. 8 billion souls who would soon belong to the Dominion or cease to exist entirely. She had never felt so helpless in her entire life. Far below, in the heart of the Himalayan mountains, something ancient was waking up, deep beneath the stone and ice. In a vault that had been sealed before the first human civilization built its first city, systems that had slept for 11,000 years suddenly came alive. Lights flickered in the darkness. Machines that predated all human technology began to hum with power. The vault had been waiting, watching, for thousands of years. It had monitored the skies above Earth, searching for a specific kind of threat. Small dangers were not enough to trigger its purpose. Wars between nations, natural disasters, even asteroid impacts were things humanity could survive on its own. But extinction was different. The ancient systems analyzed the fleet above. Earth, they calculated firepower, defensive capabilities, and probable outcomes. The result was clear. Without intervention, humanity would not survive this day. Deep within the vault, a seal that had remained unbroken since before humans, invented writing began to crack. Golden light poured through the growing gaps. It was warm and alive, pulsing like a heartbeat. The light pushed against the darkness, filling chambers that had been silent since the age of ice and mammoths. And then she opened her eyes. She had been sleeping for so long. Dreams had filled her mind for centuries upon centuries. Dreams of the children she had sworn to protect. She had watched them in her sleep, felt their joys and sorrows from across the gulf of time. She had waited for the day when they would no longer need her. That day had not yet come. She rose from her resting place, and the stone around her crumbled to dust. Her body was that of a young woman, small and slender, but the power that flowed through her veins could crack planets in half. She was older than every nation on Earth. She had been ancient when the pyramids were new. Her name was Arya, and she was humanity's first and last protector. The vault opened before her, stone doors grinding apart for the first time in 11 millennia. She walked through passages that had been carved by hands far older than human, following paths that led upward toward the light of day. As she walked, she reached out with her mind and touched the thoughts of every human on Earth. They all heard her voice at the same moment. Politicians in their meeting rooms, soldiers preparing for a hopeless battle, children hiding in their parents' arms. Lisa Chen standing at her observation window, tears running down her face. The voice was gentle. The voice was powerful. The voice carried the weight of ages. My children, I have slept too long. Forgive me. 8 billion people froze. 8 billion hearts skipped a beat. Something was happening that none of them understood. Above Earth, the Valorian fleet detected an energy signature rising from the planet's surface. Their instruments tried to measure it and failed. Their computers tried to classify it and found nothing in their records that matched. Fleet. Commander Thexus stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the readings with growing unease. He had conquered 12 worlds personally. He had broken species that had existed for millions of years. Nothing had ever confused his sensors like this. "What is that?" he demanded. His officers had no answer. On Earth's surface, the mountains split open. Golden light erupted into the sky like a second sunrise. It was visible from orbit. It was visible from the colonies on Mars and the stations around Jupiter. For one perfect moment, the entire solar system watched as something impossible emerged from the planet that had given birth to humanity. Arya rose into the air above the broken mountain. The wind whipped her dark hair around her face. Her eyes blazed with golden fire as she looked up at the fleet that had come to destroy her. Children. She had given everything to protect humanity. She had fought battles that no history book recorded. She had sacrificed more than any human could imagine. And she had slept for 11,000 years, trusting that her children would be safe. Now she was awake. Now she saw the enemy above. Now she understood that her work was not yet done. The Valorians wanted to know what she was. They sent a message, demanding identification, demanding explanation, demanding that she'd submit to their authority. Arya smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. Nothing forgiving, nothing kind. She sent her reply across every frequency the Valorians used. Her voice entered the mind of every alien in that massive fleet, burning itself into their memories. I am the answer to a question you should never have asked. I am the guardian of this world, and every human who lives upon it. I am older than your empire, stronger than your weapons, and I have not forgotten how to make war. She paused, letting her words sink into their souls. You have come here seeking conquest. You have found something else entirely. You have found me. Above Earth, for the first time in 3 centuries of easy victories, the Valorian Dominion. New fear in humanity's forgotten protector rose toward the stars to meet her enemies. Arya remembered being human. She remembered what it felt like to be small and afraid, to huddle around a fire while unknown dangers prowled in the darkness beyond the light. She remembered hunger and cold and the constant struggle to survive another day. That was 11,000 years ago. She had been born in a time before cities, before writing, before even the simplest tools. Her people lived in caves carved into hillsides, hunting animals with sharpened stones and gathering plants to eat. Life was hard and death came easily. Few of her tribe lived past 30 winters. Arya had been different from the others. She saw things they could not see. She felt things they could not feel. When danger approached, she knew it before anyone else. When sickness touched a member of her tribe, she could sometimes drive it away with nothing but her hands and her will. The others called her blessed. They called her touched by spirits. They did not understand what she truly was. Neither did she, till the night the architects came. They descended from the stars in a vessel made of light and thought. They were not beings of flesh and blood, but something far older and stranger. They existed as pure consciousness. Minds that had been born when the universe was young and had watched galaxies form and die. The architects had seeded life across 1,000 galaxies. They planted the seeds of intelligence on countless worlds, nurturing young species toward awareness and wisdom. Most of these experiments failed. Most species destroyed themselves before they could reach the stars. But the architects never stopped trying. And on a small blue world circling an ordinary yellow star, they found something that interested them greatly. They found humanity. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the smartest or the fastest or the most adaptable. But they had something the architects had rarely seen before. They had fire in their souls. They had a stubbornness that refused to accept defeat. When the universe knocked them down, they got back up and tried again. The architects saw potential in these small, fierce creatures. They saw a species that might one day grow into something magnificent. But potential meant nothing if humanity went extinct before it could be realized. So the architects chose a guardian. They searched among the humans and found a young woman whose mind burned brighter than the rest. A woman who could see beyond the limits of normal perception. A woman who loved her people with a fierce, protective devotion. They chose Arya. They took her into their vessel of light and remade her. They filled her body with energy drawn from the fabric of reality itself. They stretched her life across centuries and millennia. They gave her knowledge that would take humanity thousands of years to discover on its own. And they gave her a purpose. Protect them, the architects told her. Watch over them as they grow. Shield them from the dangers they cannot yet face alone. But let them find their own path. Let them make their own choices. Let them become what they are meant to become. Arya accepted. She returned to Earth and watched over her people as they spread across the world. She guided them through ice ages and disasters. She turned aside threats from beyond the stars that humanity never knew existed. She fought monsters in the darkness between worlds, creatures that fed on young civilizations and would have devoured humanity before it even learned to write. For 8,000 years, she walked among them. She wore 1,000 faces across countless generations. She was a wandering healer, a mysterious stranger, a wise woman who appeared when needed and vanished when her work was done. She loved them with every fiber of her being, these strange and wonderful children of Earth. But as the centuries passed, humanity grew. They built cities and empires. They developed science and technology. They began reaching toward the stars themselves. The architects had been clear. Arya was meant to protect, not to control. Humanity needed to grow on its own, to face their own challenges and make their own mistakes. If she stayed among them forever, she would become a crutch that prevented them from walking alone. So she made the hardest choice of her long existence. She descended into the vault the architects had prepared and allowed herself to sleep. The vault would watch over Earth while she dreamed. It would wake her if humanity faced extinction. Otherwise, she would remain asleep, trusting her children to build their own future. She dreamed for 11,000 years. She dreamed of humans spreading across the world, then across the solar system, then across the stars. She felt their joys and their sorrows like echoes of distant music, and now she was awake. Arya floated in the void of space, looking at the Valorian fleet that surrounded Earth. Over 1,000 warships, trillions of tons of metal and weapons, the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen. They meant nothing to her. She remembered the Valorians. She had watched them from her dreams as they began their conquests centuries ago. She had hoped humanity would never draw their attention. She had hoped her sleep could continue undisturbed. That hope was gone now. The Valorian fleet hung motionless around her. She could feel the fear radiating from the ships. Their sensors were screaming warnings that made no sense. Their weapons were targeting her. But their commanders hesitated to give the order to fire. She reached out with her mind and found the consciousness of Fleet Commander Thexus. He was an old Valorian, hardened by decades of conquest. He had crushed rebellions and broken empires. He had never hesitated in his life. He was hesitating now. "I know what you are thinking," Arya spoke directly into his mind. "You are thinking that I am a weapon. Something humanity built to defend themselves. Something that can be analyzed and countered and destroyed. She felt his mind recoil from her presence. He had never experienced anything like this before. No species had ever been able to penetrate Valorian mental shields. "You were wrong," she continued. "I am not a weapon. I am a promise. 11,000 years ago, I swore that no force in this universe would extinguish humanity's light while I still drew breath. I have kept that promise through ages you cannot imagine. I have fought enemies that would drive your entire species insane with fear." She paused, letting her words burn into his consciousness. "Your dominion has conquered the weak and the helpless. You have grown strong by feeding on those who could not fight back. But Earth is not helpless. Earth has never been helpless. Earth has me." Thexus found his voice, though it trembled despite his efforts to control it. "What do you want?" "I want you to leave," Arya said simply. "Take your fleet and return to your masters. Tell them that Earth is protected. Tell them that humanity is under my care. Tell them that if any Valorian warship ever enters this system again, I will come for them. Not for their fleets. Not for their armies. For them personally. I will find every leader who gives the order, and I will show them exactly what I am capable of." "We do not retreat," Thexus said, but there was no conviction in his words. "The Dominion does not surrender." "Then you will learn," Arya replied. "Right now, today, you will learn what happens when you threaten my children." She gave him 10 seconds to make a choice. He made the wrong one. "All ships," Thexus commanded, his voice cracking with desperation. "Open fire. Destroy that thing now." 1,200 warships unleashed their weapons at once. The darkness of space turned to blinding fire. Energy that could shatter moons converged on Arya. From every direction, she stood in the center of the storm and waited for it to end. When the light faded, she remained exactly where she had been, untouched, unmoved. Her eyes still blazed with golden. "Fire. My turn," she said, and the Valorian Dominion learned. The true meaning of fear. Arya moved through the Valorian fleet like a ghost made of starlight. The first ship she reached was the Subjugator's Pride, a destroyer that had burned cities on a dozen conquered worlds. Its captain ordered every weapon to fire at point-blank range. Missiles exploded against her skin. Energy beams passed through her like she was made of smoke. She placed her hand against the ship's hull and pushed. The metal bent inward. Systems failed. Lights flickered and died. In the space of a heartbeat, a warship that had terrorized entire civilizations became nothing more than a drifting piece of scrap. Arya did not destroy it. She did not kill the crew inside. She simply turned everything off. Reactors went cold. Weapons powered down. Life support dropped to emergency levels. The Valorians aboard would survive. They would never forget the moment when their mighty vessel became a helpless coffin. She moved to the next ship, then the next, then the next. The Valorian commanders tried everything. They coordinated their attacks. They activated experimental weapons that had never been used before. They launched boarding parties in desperate attempts to reach her somehow. Anyhow, nothing worked. Arya passed through shields like they did not exist. She shrugged off attacks that could have cracked planets in half. She moved faster than their sensors could track, appearing inside one ship before the others even realized she had left the last, on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. Fleet Commander Thexus watched his fleet die around him. Not die exactly. Worse than die. Ship after ship went dark, transformed from instruments of conquest into floating tombs. His officers screamed reports that made no sense. His tactical displays filled with error messages in 4 minutes and 37 seconds. It was over. The greatest armada the Valorian Dominion had ever assembled hung motionless in the void. Over 1,000 warships, crewed by millions of Valorians, reduced to helplessness by a single being. Not one ship remained operational. Not one weapon could still fire. Arya appeared on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion itself. She simply materialized out of thin air, standing before Thexus like she had always been there. The bridge crew scrambled for weapons. Guards rushed forward to protect their commander. Arya did not even look at them. She waved her hand and they all froze in place, unable to move, unable to speak, Only Thexus could still talk. He faced her with what little dignity he had left. "What are you?" he whispered. "I told you what I am," Arya replied. "I am humanity's protector. I am the guardian who watches over Earth. I am the promise that was made when your ancestors were still learning to walk upright." She stepped closer to him. Her eyes burned with golden fire, but her voice was calm and controlled. "You came here seeking an easy conquest. You expected humans to surrender or die. You thought this would be another simple victory to add to your collection of broken worlds." She smiled, and there was something terrible in that smile. "You were wrong." Thexus tried to speak, but his voice failed him. He had commanded fleets. He had ordered the deaths of billions. He had never felt anything like the fear that now gripped his hearts. "I am going to let you live," Arya continued. "I am going to let all of you live. Not because you deserve mercy. Not because I forgive what your dominion has done to the galaxy, but because I need you to deliver a message." She reached out and touched his forehead. Information poured into his mind, overwhelming his senses. He saw things he could not understand. He felt power beyond anything he had ever imagined. "You will return to your homeworld," Arya commanded. "You will go before your High Council and tell them exactly what happened here. You will show them every record, every sensor reading, every memory, and you will tell them this message from me." Her voice echoed through the entire ship, through every ship in the ruined fleet. "Humanity is under my protection. Every human, no matter where they are. Every colony, no matter how small. Every ship, no matter how far it travels. If any force in this galaxy threatens them, I will know, and I will come." She paused, letting her words sink into the minds of every Valorian listening. "Your dominion has spent 3 centuries conquering the weak. That era is over. From this day forward, you will leave humanity alone. You will not threaten them. You will not harm them. You will not even look at them with hostile intent." Her eyes blazed brighter. "If you test me, you will not survive the lesson. I have lived for 11,000 years. I have fought enemies that would make your entire species go mad with terror. Your fleet was nothing to me. Your empire would be nothing to me. Remember that when you make your decisions." She released her hold on Thexus. He staggered backward, gasping for breath. "I have left your ships with enough power to send 1 transmission," Arya said. "Use it wisely. Tell your masters what you have witnessed. Tell them the Protector has awakened. Tell them that humanity is no longer alone." She turned away from him and looked out through the view screen at the stars beyond. "And tell them that if I ever have to come to your homeworld, it will not be for conversation." She vanished. One moment she was there, and the next she was gone. No flash of light, no sound. She simply ceased to be in that location. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Commander Thexus collapsed into his command chair. His hands were shaking. His mind was reeling from what he had experienced. Around him, his officers slowly regained the ability to move, looking at each other with wide, terrified eyes. No one spoke. There was nothing to say. Below them, Earth continued to turn. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting through the atmosphere. 8 billion humans looked up at the sky where the fleet had hung and saw that the threat was over. They did not know how it had happened. They did not understand what Arya truly was, but they knew with absolute certainty that something had changed. The Valorian transmission reached their homeworld 3 days later. The High Council watched the records in stunned silence. They saw their mighty fleet reduced to helplessness. They heard the message from the ancient being who called herself humanity's protector. For the first time in their recorded history, the Valorian Dominion knew fear, and across the galaxy, word began to spread. Something had happened at Earth, something impossible. A single being had defeated the greatest military power the galaxy had ever known. Intelligence agencies scrambled for information. Scientists debated what kind of creature could possess such power. Theologians wondered if they had witnessed the rise of a god. But one thing was clear to everyone who heard the story: humanity was no longer a minor species to be ignored and exploited. Humanity had a protector, and she had finally awakened. The galaxy would never be the same. In the deep vault, beneath the Himalayan mountains, Arya stood alone in the darkness. She could feel the fear spreading across the stars. She could sense the old powers, the ancient civilizations. Turning their attention toward Earth, her work was not finished. The Valorians were only the beginning. There were others out there who had hurt her children during her long sleep. Others who had enslaved them, experimented on them, treated them as worthless primitives. She would visit each of them in turn. Humanity had suffered too long while she dreamed. She had failed to protect them when they needed her most. That failure weighed on her heart like a stone, but she was awake now, and she would make things right, no matter what it cost her. Word traveled across. It's a galaxy faster than light itself, on 1,000 worlds. In 100 different languages, beings whispered about what had happened at Earth. They spoke of the ancient guardian who had risen from the ground. They spoke of the Valorian fleet reduced to floating wreckage. They spoke of the message that had been broadcast across all frequencies. Humanity is protected. Touch them and face destruction. Most species dismissed it as exaggeration at first. The Valorians were powerful, but they were not invincible. Perhaps the humans had developed some new weapon. Perhaps they had found allies willing to fight for them. The truth must be simpler than the wild stories suggested. Then Arya began her journey across the stars. Her first destination was the Kethrani mining colonies in the outer reaches. For 60 years, the Kethrani Collective had been using human prisoners as slave labor in their deep space operations. The work was deadly. Radiation, toxic gases, and collapsing tunnels killed humans by the hundreds. The Kethrani did not care. Humans were cheap and replaceable. Arya appeared in the capital city of the Kethrani homeworld without warning. She descended from the sky in the middle of their government district, surrounded by golden light. Security forces opened fire immediately. Their weapons passed through her like she was made of mist. She walked through their defenses and entered the Grand Council chamber itself. The Kethrani leaders saw her coming on their security feeds. They watched their guards try and fail to stop her. They watched her walk through walls and locked doors as if they did not exist. By the time she entered the chamber, half of them had already fled. The ones who remained faced her with trembling limbs. "You have taken humans as slaves," Arya said calmly. "You have worked them to death in your mines. You have treated them as property rather than people." The council speaker tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to justify what his people had done. Arya did not let him finish. "You have 1 day to release every human prisoner in your territory. You will return them to Earth with full compensation for their suffering. You will sign a treaty guaranteeing that no human will ever be enslaved by your people again." The speaker found his voice. "And if we refuse?" Arya looked at him with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. "There will be no negotiation," she said. "There will be no second chance. I am not offering you a choice. I am telling you what is going to happen. The only question is whether you cooperate or whether I have to convince you." The Kethrani cooperated within 18 hours. Transport ships were carrying freed humans back to Earth. The prisoners could not believe what was happening. Some had been slaves for decades. Some had been born in captivity and had never known freedom. They wept as they saw their homeworld growing larger through the VIEWPOR. T.S. Arya did not stay to watch the reunions. There were other wrongs to be righted. The Syndicate of Morrow was next. They were not conquerors like the Valorians or slavers like the Kethrani. They were scientists, researchers, seekers of knowledge, and they had been capturing humans for experimentation for over a century. Humans fascinated the Syndicate. Human brains were different from any other species in the galaxy. They had a unique ability to adapt, to learn, to reshape their own neural pathways. The Syndicate wanted to understand this ability. They wanted to replicate it. They did not ask permission. Human subjects were taken from remote colonies and isolated ships. They were brought to hidden research stations and subjected to experiments that would have made monsters weep. Some were dissected while still alive. Others had their minds pulled apart piece by piece. The Syndicate kept detailed records of everything they did. Arya found those records. When she entered their primary research facility, she walked through corridors filled with holding cells and laboratories. She saw what had been done to her children in the name of science. Something changed in her then with the Valorians. She had been controlled. With the Kethrani, she had been patient. But here, surrounded by the evidence of horrors committed against helpless humans, her control slipped. The research station ceased to exist. She did not destroy it with weapons or fire. She reached into the quantum structure of matter itself and simply removed the station from reality. One moment it was there. The next moment, it was not. No explosion, no debris. Just a hole in space where something used to be. The Syndicate of Morrow collapsed within a week. News of what had happened spread instantly. The other leaders of the Syndicate fled to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Their members scattered and hid. Their organization fell apart as everyone tried to escape the wrath of the Ancient Guardian. There was no place far enough to hide. But Arya let them run. They were no longer a threat. The message had been delivered. Across the galaxy. Other species watched and learned. The ones who had harmed humans began making reparations before Arya could even visit them. They released prisoners. They signed treaties. They sent apologies and compensation to Earth. They did everything possible to avoid drawing her attention. The ones who had never harmed humans made sure to treat them with respect. Human traders who had accepted insults and exploitation for generations suddenly found themselves welcomed as valued partners. Human colonists who had lived in fear discovered that their neighbors now treated them with careful courtesy. For the first time in their history among the stars, humans walked with their heads held high. But the greatest change was among the elder races. The truly ancient civilizations, who had existed for millions of years. They watched Arya's actions with growing recognition. They knew what she was, even if the younger species did not. The architects had been legends, even to them. The ancient beings of pure thought who had seeded life across the galaxies. Most believed they had vanished long ago, moved on to dimensions beyond the understanding of physical beings. But here was their legacy, standing in the form of a human woman. Here was proof that the architects had not forgotten the universe they had helped create, the eldest of the elder races. The beings who rarely spoke to anyone began to speak of Earth with new respect. They called humanity the chosen ones, the species the architects had selected as worthy of protection. They whispered that perhaps the architects had seen something in humans that no one else had. Noticed perhaps humanity was destined for greatness, beyond anything the galaxy had ever known. Arya did not care about these whispers. She did not seek respect or worship or fear. She only wanted her children to be safe. In the year following her awakening, she traveled to every corner of the galaxy where humans had suffered. She freed the enslaved. She avenged the murdered. She forced powerful species to acknowledge humanity's right to exist as equals. And when the work was done, when no more threats remained to be answered, she returned to Earth. She stood on the mountain where she had first emerged, looking up at the stars. The same stars she had watched for 11,000 years. The same stars where her children now lived and worked and dreamed. They were safe. For now, they were safe. But she knew her work was not finished. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers she could not predict. New threats would arise. New enemies would emerge. She would be waiting for them. She would always be waiting for them. 100 years had passed since Arya awakened. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. Humanity had changed beyond recognition. The small, overlooked species that had once been dismissed as primitives now stood among the greatest civilizations in known space. Human colonies spread across 100 star systems. Human scientists made discoveries that reshaped galactic understanding of physics and biology. Human artists created works that moved species who had never experienced emotion before. Human philosophers asked questions that elder races had never thought to ask. And through it all, Arya watched. She did not interfere in their daily lives. She did not guide their decisions or control their paths. She simply watched as she had watched for 11,000 years, ready to act if true danger arose. True danger rarely arose anymore. The memory of what she had done to the Valorian fleet never faded. The story of the Syndicate research station that had been erased from existence passed from generation to generation. Every species in the galaxy knew the name of humanity's protector. Every species knew what would happen if they threatened her children. Peace settled over the human territories, a peace built not on weakness, but on the absolute certainty of protection. Humans no longer needed to fear the darkness between stars, but Arya knew that this peace could not last forever. New threats would emerge. New enemies would arise. And she could not be everywhere at once, so she began to teach. She chose humans who showed potential. Men and women whose spirits burned with the same fire that had drawn the architects to Earth so long ago. She shared fragments of her knowledge with them. Not the full power she carried, but enough to make a difference. A new generation of guardians began to emerge. They were not as powerful as Arya. They could not move planets or erase matter from existence. But they could defend their people. They could stand against threats that would have crushed ordinary humans. Humanity was learning to protect itself. On the centennial of her awakening, Arya was invited to address the Galactic Concordat, the assembly of the most powerful civilizations in known space. Every major species would be represented. Every eye in the galaxy would be watching. She appeared before them not as a conqueror or a god, but as a woman. She wore simple clothes. Her hair was dark, and her eyes were calm. She looked exactly like what she had always been, human. The assembly fell silent as she stepped to the center of the great chamber. Thousands of beings from hundreds of species watched her with a mixture of fear, respect, and curiosity. "You have asked me to come here," she began, "because you want to understand what I am. You want to know where I came from, what I want, and what I plan to do next." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings who had ruled empires when humans still lived in caves. "I will tell you the truth. I am human. I was born in a time so distant that none of your histories record it. I have lived for 11,000 years, watching my people grow from scattered tribes into a civilization that now spans the stars." She paused, letting her words settle into the minds of her audience. "The power I carry was given to me by beings you call the architects. They saw something in humanity that they valued. They saw a species that refused to give up, no matter how hard the universe pushed against them. They saw fire in our souls that no darkness could extinguish." Some in the audience shifted uncomfortably. The architects were legends, almost myths. To hear their existence confirmed was unsettling. "I am not humanity's power," Arya continued. "I am merely a promise made visible. I am what we can become when we are given the chance to grow. My people have proven themselves worthy of that chance. They have built, discovered, created, and dreamed. They have shown that the architects chose well." She stepped forward, and her voice grew stronger. "You have spent centuries dismissing humanity as primitives, as lesser beings unworthy of respect. Many of you exploited them, enslaved them, experimented on them. You saw them as resources to be used rather than people to be valued." The chamber was absolutely silent. "That era is over. Humanity has earned its place among you. Not through my power, but through their own achievements. They deserve to be treated as equals because they have proven themselves to be equals." Ash! She looked directly at the elder races, the ancient ones who had watched her with knowing eyes. "I have no demands beyond what I have already established. Humanity will be respected. Humanity will be protected. In exchange, humans will continue to contribute to the galactic community as partners, as friends, as fellow travelers in the great journey between the stars." She smiled, and for the first time, there was warmth in it. "That is all I have ever wanted. For my children to be safe. For them to have the chance to become everything they were meant to be. They are doing that now. They are exceeding every expectation." She turned in a slow circle, addressing the entire assembly. "The day is coming when they will no longer need me. The day is coming when they will have their own protectors, their own guardians, their own defenders. On that day, I will return to my sleep, satisfied that my promise has been kept." Her voice softened. But know this. Even in my sleep, I will be watching. Even in my dreams, I will be aware. If true extinction ever threatens humanity again, I will wake, and I will answer. This is my promise to my children, and it is my warning to everyone else. The Galactic Concordat accepted humanity as a full member that day. There was no debate. There was no opposition. No one dared to vote against Arya's children. In the decades that followed, humanity flourished beyond anything their ancestors could have imagined. They became leaders in science and art. They formed alliances with species that had once looked down on them. They spread across the galaxy as explorers and dreamers, and Arya watched with pride. In her ancient heart, the day she had dreamed of for 11,000 years finally arrived on a quiet morning in the 251st year after her awakening. Humanity had grown strong enough to stand alone. Their guardians were ready to protect them. Their civilization was stable and thriving. She called her children together one last time. Billions watched as she addressed them from the mountain where she had first emerged. You were never small, she told them. You were never insignificant. You were seeds waiting for the right moment to bloom. And now you have. You have grown into something beautiful and strong and wonderful. Her eyes glistened with tears that could have melted stars. I have loved you since before your species had a name. I will love you long after the stars have burned out and new ones have taken their place. You are my children. You will always be my children. She smiled at them, at the billions of faces watching her, at the species that had grown from frightened cave dwellers into lords of the cosmos. Grow tall, my beloved ones. Spread across the stars. Dream bigger than any species has ever dreamed. And remember, you are human. That has always been enough. She descended into a new vault built by human hands and sealed with human technology. The doors closed behind her. The Guardian returned to her long sleep. But across the galaxy, in every corner where intelligent beings gathered, a new saying took hold. When threats arose and hope seemed lost, beings would remember the ancient protector of Earth. They would whisper to each other, "Be careful. Humanity is watching. And somewhere, their guardian sleeps. Pray you never give her reason to wake." The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was never alone, and they never would be.